The Fairfield Forum is a student-centered speaking program hosted by the Forum team at Fairfield Middle School. Each month, the Forum will present community leaders from a variety of backgrounds to speak at our student body. The theme of our talks for our inaugural season is excellence. Today's program, our second, will be in a special panel format. We are extremely excited to hear our four speakers talk to us today about excellence and offer some insight into our community-led revitalization of the Cornerstone Farm. Before we begin, we would like to extend some thank yous to those who helped us make today possible. We would like to first thank and welcome the representatives from the Henrico County School Board in attendance today, Dr. Roscoe Cooper and Mrs. Alicia Atkins. We welcome the representatives in attendance from the Henrico School and Water Conservation Board of Directors, Ms. Claiborne Yarbrough and Ms. Anna Marie Leak, as well as staff members Mrs. Linda Durham and Mr. Charlie Levi. We also welcome our guests from Henrico County Schools Division Leadership. Your support is crucial, inspiring, and very much appreciated. We would like to thank our principal, Dr. Gibson, and the entire Fairfield Administrative Cabinet for their support of the forum and of our inquiry of the validation of Cornerstone Farm. We would like to thank our community sponsors, Lowe's of East Richmond, Smartmouth, and the Richmond Forum, whose support is proof that learning at Fairfield is truly community supported. Of course, a tremendous thank you is also in order to the teachers and students of Fairfield who are joining us here today, as well as the 32 student leaders who make up our forum team. Please give yourselves a round of applause. Finally, all of us at Fairfield need to extend a much-deserved thank you to Dr. Amanda Hall and Mr. Toby Vernon. Their dream of bringing Cornerstone Farm into existence at our middle school was a dream that was realized and would not be forgotten. Their tenacity and creativity continues to inspire us. It's only their shoulders that we will stand in our effort to keep their dreams going. Thank you, Dr. Hall and Mr. Vernon. Now I would like to introduce 8th grader Kennedy George to help us welcome our panel.
Dr. Basil Gooden is a visiting scholar at the VCU School of Social Work Sustainable Food Access Core of the Institute for Inclusion, Inquiry, and Innovation. Prior to arriving at VCU, Dr. Gooden served Virginia as the Commonwealth's 3rd Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry from 2016 to 2018. As Secretary, Dr. Gooden provided strategic vision and leadership to 2 of Virginia's largest private industries. Secretary, Dr. Gooden provided private industries, agriculture, and forestry. Prior to serving as the secretary, Dr. Gooden was appointed by then President Barack Obama as the Virginia State Director for Rural Development at the USDA. Dr. Gooden has also served as the Chief Deputy Director of Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development and as the Coordinator of Outreach and Community Relations at Virginia Tech. Dr. Gooden received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Virginia Tech, his Master of Social Work degree from Syracuse University, his Master of Public Health degree from UNC Chapel Hill, and his Doctor of Philosophy degree from UNC Chapel Hill. Dr. Gooden is a native of Buckingham County, Virginia, and currently resides in Richmond, Virginia. Please give a warm Fairfield welcome to Dr. Basil Gooden.
Mr. John Montgomery Jr. is a Richmond area attorney and former chair of the Henrico County School Board. Mr. Montgomery was the elected school board representative from the Rainwater District and served as the school board chair until 2019. Mr. Montgomery grew up in Louisiana and is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. After earning his Bachelor of Science degree at West Point, Mr. Montgomery served as the Airborne and Ranger Infantry officer in a variety of positions. After leaving the Army, Mr. Montgomery joined the National Guard until his unit was deactivated from federal service. He returned to Louisiana to attend Tulane University Law School, where he graduated with honors and today has a law firm that represents clients throughout the greater Richmond area. Through the years, Mr. Montgomery has been a great champion of the Cornerstone Farm through advocacy in local government, fundraising, and providing essential advice and support. Welcome back to Fairfield, Mr. Montgomery.
Ms. Nicole Anderson Ellis is chair of the Henricopolis Soil and Water Conservation District Board, co-chair of the Route 5 Corridor Coalition, and associate professor in the VCU Department of Focused Inquiry. Before coming to Tech to teach at VCU, Anderson Ellis taught environmental education and worked as a journalist/editor, living in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., North Alabama, and Richmond. Ms. Anderson Ellis received a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from UCLA and a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from VCU. Ms. Anderson Ellis is also a writer of both fiction and nonfiction. Her works focus on the theme of sustainability. It should also be noted that Ms. Anderson Ellis has a tremendous influence in establishing Cornerstone Farm here at Fairfield when the effort first began. Ms. Anderson Ellis, this generation of Falcons welcome you back to Fairfield.
Mr. Kyle Dosier is a farmer and musician who grew up in Central Virginia. His work with Richmond's various garden education programs, as well as his experience working for farmers markets, grocery stores, and an organic vegetable and chicken farm, gave him a unique perspective of the region's food system. Now a graduate of the Sustainable Agriculture program at Reynolds Community College, Kyle wants to build a farm center in his community of Richmond's East End. It is great to have you here on stage with us. Welcome, Mr. Kyle.
Our program will begin with our panel speaking to our monitor, Mr. Lapris, followed by a student-led question and answer session. How about one more welcome to our panel?
All right, Kaya and Kennedy, thank you. How about one more time for Kaya and Kennedy? Their biographies are so long, we had to get two speakers this time. Wonderful. Well, guys, welcome. The microphones, we got a button right here. So I understand that this is actually none of our first times at Fairfield. Is that correct? Mr. Montgomery, you had a couple children who went here.
Yep, I had two that came through here. This was a great spot for them.
Wonderful. Dr. Gooden, something pretty cool you just told me. Your sister?
Yes, my sister used to teach here, yeah.
Do we have a name for any teachers who might have been here when she was here?
Oh, well,
Okay.
her name, was Jacqueline C., but that was 15, 20 years ago.
Oh, okay. Ms. Anderson Ellis, you've been here before, I assume?
I have. It's been my pleasure to be working less time in the buildings and more time in the land next door, but
That's right.
always a pleasure.
Yeah. And Kyle.
Yeah, y'all see me around, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so I have some questions to get to know you guys a little bit more. Our students, our VIP students in the front row, have some questions for you guys for the Q&A session. I've got a rapid fire question though for each of you, just kind of a brief question for each of you. Could you guys tell us maybe at which age or under which circumstances you first became interested in agriculture, in farming, or in the environment? Dr. Gooden, you won the toss, so you
Well,
start.
thank you. First, let me thank Dr. Gibson, a great team here at Fairfield. Thanks, Mr. Leffers for the invitation. I actually grew up on a farm. I was born and raised on a farm, and so I was exposed at a very early age to animals and to crops. However, growing up on a farm, it's a lot of work and a lot of energy, and I didn't like it as much when I was a kid, maybe your age, and so I went to Virginia Tech to get away from farming, but it was at Virginia Tech that I realized how important agriculture is to our daily lives, and we'll talk more about that. But that's when I became interested in agriculture for the first time, seriously, when I was a student at Virginia Tech.
Wonderful, thank you. Mr. Montgomery, same
Very
question.
good, thank you. And I want to echo the thanks to all of those who invited us here today for a great program, and particularly to the students, those that we've met already and those that we're going to hear from in a few minutes. You're doing a great job and we really appreciate it. So I grew up in a small town in the western corner of Louisiana. If you're familiar with that state, it's like a boot. And up in the corner up near Texas, in Shreveport is where I grew up. And my grandfather ran about 100 cows, and he had a garden. He called it a garden. I would call it a farm these days. It was an acre or so. And he used fertilizer and all the things that are sort of traditional agriculture, but we fished a lot. He'd actually come get me. I'd cut school, and he would kind of signal like this, and I thought, what's now? The next thing you know, we were heading off in his pickup truck to go fishing. But he would also do things, so the fish that we caught and the other things we had, he would use a lot of those things as fertilizer. And so while he was practicing traditional agriculture with a lot of petroleum products and so forth, he also was incorporating kind of historical sustainable practices. So I thought that was extremely interesting. So throughout my high school time, we always had a garden and a farm, and I would help out as much as possible. So I really had to, and my other grandfather as well also had a large farm and garden. So I really had to attribute to those two gentlemen and my grandmothers as well for exposing me to it and opening up my heart to that.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, Ms. Anderson, same question.
Well, again, thank you all so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I grew up in Atlanta. I grew up in a big city, and my parents did not garden at all. But both of my sets of grandparents lived in the country, and both of them did garden. And so for me, exposure to a garden was something I did on vacation, like on my time off. It was never a chore for me. It was always a pleasure. But from the time I was very small, I always felt that when I was in nature, and sometimes it was big nature, like a national park on a holiday, but just as much the small piece of woods back behind our house, or the kind of edge of the schoolyard, those were the places where I liked myself the most. Those were the places where I felt the most relaxed, the most comfortable, the most real, and that's always stuck with me. And so if it's farmland or parkland or just a creek bottom, that's where I like to be.
Great answer, thank you. Mr. Kyle?
Yeah, and I grew up in the suburbs, and my parents didn't garden either. It wasn't until I was an adult that I really started getting interested in this kind of stuff, partly because I just didn't have the opportunity to go out in nature a lot. You know, I have distinct memories from an elementary school kid being fascinated by like a hive of ground bees or something. But I wasn't really comfortable in that space until I went to college, and I went to William & Mary, which is about half woods around a lake. And it was just a place for me to get away and learn more about myself as I grew up. So that was my first real true connection with the natural world, was as a place to learn more about myself by seeing my connection to everything around me, and to give that kind of quietude where I can learn about myself without other people around. It wasn't until I moved to Richmond and was trying to grow some stuff in the city to help with my allergies that I really got interested in growing my own food. And it just spiraled out from a couple of tomato plants to a small community garden to a bigger community garden. And then I realized, well, I got to figure out how to do this on a bigger scale, because I really love to eat delicious food and to give other people delicious food.
Okay, I think we do too. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. And one kind of just quick question for you guys. I imagine that you speak often to audiences who are like top maybe policymakers in the state or the country or the county. But how often would you say that the audience you speak to at these presentations know nothing about farming, know nothing about the environment until you tell them and their eyes go wide? I mean, does it happen often sometimes?
I teach at VCU, so being the first person to introduce ideas is pretty comfortable for me. And I teach first-year students, so I get them on their first day of college, and their eyes are really big, and they don't know where anything is. So I think it's a great honor to be able to introduce set them on the path, right? Or even tell them that the path exists. So I'm delighted.
Yeah, wonderful. And you might even be doing it right now. How many of you guys in the audience, show of hands, because it's on camera back there, will openly admit that you guys don't know a whole lot about farming? Openly admit it. Come on, it's okay. Okay, that's all right. Hands down. For context, though. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Raise your hand if you eat food. Okay, so you rely on farming. All right, good. We're going to make important connections today.
Yeah, we're stacking the deck out there with people who love food. And how about this for the audience, show of hands. How many of you guys, so our panel can see, how many of you guys have taken a trip out to Cornerstone Farm this year with any teacher here at Fairfield? Just show of hands. How many of us have been out to the farm with a teacher? Okay, hey, wonderful, wonderful, excellent. All right, cool. So we're going to get into a little bit more individualized questions for you guys before we turn it over to the students. To catch you guys up on our last forum, our superintendent, Dr. Cashwell, was here, spoke to us about excellence. And one of the big things she spoke about was how excellence is a mindset. And when you apply essential skills to this mindset, you can do any job you want, no matter whether it's a really top job or a job that maybe people don't see too often. Dr. Gooden, I have a question for you. We're going to pass the baton on. Of all of the government departments that you have been in charge of or at the top of, could you tell us which one had the most amount of people report to you? And could you give a ballpark of how many people that was, just real quick?
Sure. Well, thank you. I've actually been in charge of 3 different departments, 2 at the state level and 1 at the federal level. Actually, the position at the state level, I had about 120 people report to me, so that was the largest number. So it was very important that I, as a leader of an agency, set an example. I certainly talked about agriculture, I talked about doing good things, talked about community involvement, civic engagement. So it goes beyond just being the leader of an agency. But the agency that had the most resources, the impact on agriculture, was at the federal level, and where we had several $billions with a B that we were able to impact agriculture here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so that was, I guess, the most impactful position. But I've worked for 5 governors now, actually 6 with the current governor. And so really enjoy time dealing with individuals who impact our daily lives. And so thank you for that question.
Yeah, well, I have a follow-up to that too. I'm curious because you work in this job day to day where you're wearing a suit and tie, and you've also worked in jobs on a farm where you could very well be stepping in manure. So my question is have you noticed in your experience a similar quality in people who can perform at a high level in government work, this extremely high level of government work, and those same skills could translate over to working at a high level on a farm? Are there similar skills between the two?
Right. Actually, I would probably change it the other way. I think that actually working on a farm, you could take those skills and transfer that to almost any position, whether it's a teacher, a physician, a doctor, lawyer, because you learn so much working on a farm. You learn about having to be responsible for something, being able to plant a seed in the ground or help a calf be born and things of that nature. So I would say it's what I learned working in the soil, working on a farm, that actually helped me succeed in government and be able to go around the world. I mean, I had the honor and the blessing to be able to go to almost 30 countries to talk about agriculture and sit in front of people. But it's really what I think I learned on a farm, being out there, working with nature, that enabled me to go and make these presentations around the world.
Wonderful. Okay, great answer. Thank you. Mr. Montgomery, I have an article here written about you in 2007 in Style Weekly. Can I read a sentence from it? It's your words. Okay, this is I assume you probably wrote this in. My military career taught me that communication is essential to an effective organization. Does that sound like something you would have said?
I'll take credit for it.
Okay, so I'm really glad you said that, because I have often thought that if you were to poll people, maybe our students or anybody in the world, and ask them, what do you think makes a successful soldier? Or what do you think people learn in the armed services? I highly doubt that people would say communication. Might say other things, but you did. So I'm curious, are there any other things that you learned in the armed forces? You applied it to keep us safe then, and you apply it now in your job as an attorney or on the school board?
Absolutely. Well, I will say that communication is essential because, and it's not just verbal, it's what you see when you give instructions and when you receive instructions, because the most excited and motivated group of people if they don't have an understanding of what the common goal is or what the direction is, then they can't pass it on to those that are working with them, and you're not going to be able to accomplish things. You're going to just kind of move in place. Now, I will tell you this, that if I look back over my time in my career, the thing that motivates me the most, and I think it motivates others as well, is that you don't want to let down the person on your left and right of you. And the reason that motivates me, and I think it motivates others as well, is that, and I'm going to encourage you to do this is also, always find a way to be part of something that's bigger than yourself. And you've experienced that on teams that you play on. These students in the forum have experienced it. Everyone here has experienced it in the jobs that they held. Because if you're part of something that's bigger than yourself, then you will make sure to put yourself behind that organization and put their goals and that group's goals and motivation first. So I encourage each of you as you go through your life, and I still do it myself, I'll try to find something to dedicate my time and energy to that's bigger than me. And it doesn't have to be, it can be, obviously we all have families, we all have teams that we play on. The students that are around you in your class, always work to make sure that you're not letting them down, and when you do that, that you will not let yourself down. So if excellence is something that you want to have in your life, be part of something that's bigger than you on a day-to-day basis, and I suggest to you that you'll find excellence.
Thank you. That's a great answer, and thank you for your military service. Round of applause. Thank you. Ms. Anderson Ellis, come to you. I want to get into all of the jobs and roles and responsibilities that you have, because you have a lot. One question, there's a word, though, that comes up when people talk about you, when they've told me about you and in articles. Do you know what that word is? I think you do. I bet there are other people on the panel now. Inspiring. Inspiring. Panel, does that sound right? Ms. Anderson Ellis, yeah. I'm curious, could you tell us what your passion is? What is the thing that drives you? What are the questions that like energize you that you want to know the answers to?
That's a big question. I think that at this point in my life, the thing that is making me most passionate, and maybe it's the same thing, I think maybe it's the same thing I felt when I was your age, when I was in middle school or younger. It's just I've been trying to kind of walk around this question to figure it out, is the idea that we are all the same. That we focus so much on the ways in which we're all different, but when you go inside of all of us, we all want the same things. We want to be, you were talking about communication, I was thinking this, we want to be understood. I think one of the most frustrating experiences that every human being feels is when people misunderstand us. When they think we're doing something for one reason and they think we're doing it for another reason, right? Or they misunderstand the look on our face, or they misunderstand the posture that we have, or we're trying to do the right thing and we're perceived as doing the wrong. And I think we all want to be understood. We all want to have an important job. We all want to feel like we're doing something important and making a difference. We all want to feel like we're getting better. We all love to do things that we're good at. We're all frustrated when we mess up. We all struggle to say we're sorry. Like, there are all these things that we all want to eat delicious food made for us by someone who loves us. We all want to live in beautiful places. We all want to sleep in comfortable beds and not be interrupted while we're dreaming. You know, we all want the same things. We go about doing it different ways, and what is beautiful to us and what is restful to us and what is good to us is maybe different. But I think what inspires me right now is just trying to, when I meet new people, see the ways in which we're the same and focus on that.
That's such a great answer.
It's one of the reasons I love nature, because nature looks at us all the same. The storm treats us all the same. The river treats us all the same.
That's a really beautiful answer. I'll follow up by asking, do you think in the jobs that you've done throughout your life as a journalist, as a writer, now as a professor, do you think that all of those things you've done in pursuit of those passions?
Those are the things that taught me the ways in which we're all the same. Because as a journalist, you're just interacting with people in different situations, and all I did was talk to people as a journalist. I would just sit down, I would listen to their stories, I would ask them questions. I'm a really curious person. I want to know about when I meet people, I'm like, oh, so what's your story? And I mean, I've known you forever, and I didn't know all this stuff I learned today. So I always have follow-up questions. So that's where I learned, like, oh, I'm sitting with someone who I think is very different from me, but the more we talk, the more I'm like, oh, I get that. I understand that. My version of that story is different, but at the heart, it's the same. And certainly teaching. I mean, every year, I have 88 students, and they are, when you look at us at face value, we're so different, but one of the first things I do in school is an exercise where I have everybody line up on one side of the room, and then I'll make a statement of fact, like, if anybody in your family was in the military, or if you have, if anybody in your family's sick, or if you've ever had anybody make fun of you for your beliefs, or just different statements, and then people cross the room if it's true for them. And right like that, we find out all the ways in which we're the same, and it changes the way we look at each other for ongoing.
Thank you. Thank you for those answers. Mr. Kyle, are you from Richmond originally?
No, I grew up in Fredericksburg, Virginia, so just about 50 miles north of here.
Okay. The reason I ask is because I've gotten to know you a little bit, a lot actually, over these last 5 months, and you speak so wisely and so passionately about the Richmond community. I just assumed you were. Found out you were from Fredericksburg. So my question for you is there something about the Richmond community in particular that you believe in, or is it bigger than that? Do you just believe in communities? And could you tell us why you do, or is it all the above?
Well, I do think Richmond is special. I love Richmond because it's incredibly diverse. You can find all different kinds of people here. It's a special city where you can raise a family and work at a restaurant. You don't have to be wealthy to do that in Richmond. You can own property here. You can interact with everybody. You know, I love Church Hill as a neighborhood. That's where I live, because my neighbors know me and I know them, because I can go into my backyard and look across the alleyway and say hi. We can sit together, have a meal, have a drink, and have a conversation. And that's not something I found in Fredericksburg. It's not something I find everywhere. But Richmond is a special place in my heart because the people here are interested in knowing each other and building something in this unique space. And I think the city itself and its land is inspiring to me. Where it sits on the James River, where it's been as a cultural center since before Europeans arrived on this continent, all that is really special, and there's so much history that's happened here about the relationships between people, bad and good, that this place is steeped in that blood and history, and it imbues it with power. So in that way, Richmond has a unique power in a community. Yes, I'm interested in community building as a whole, and that's what I want to do everywhere. But I'm going to gravitate to the spaces that have that power and that are primed for that, and Richmond is one of those spaces. So I'm really invested in this particular space because of the people here, but also because of the history of the place and the land. And I wanted to echo what almost everybody here has said already, which is that when you work for something that's bigger than yourself, you can accomplish things that you never could have accomplished by yourself. It's pretty simple, and I find myself isolating myself all the time. It's a habit, right, that I picked up when I was young, and that I think a lot of us pick up, which is that, well, I'm gonna do it my way, and I'm gonna do all the work myself because I can't trust anybody, or like I feel like I can do it the best. And that has never worked out for me. And I try it every year. I try it every few months. I catch myself doing it. And I have to stop myself and rebuild a habit that says, well, what is my neighbor good at? What can we do together? Because when I sit down and think about it, what brings me the most joy is knowing people and those relationships with people. Because when you look in somebody else's eyes, and when you work with somebody, when you have friends, you learn a lot more about yourself. You learn truth about yourself. And you learn a lot more about everybody else. When I feel safe and whole, it's because I understand the connections to the people around me and to the community that's not human around me. So.
Thank you. That's a great answer. And you guys are all such wonderful leaders for our community. You show us the light, lead the way. Okay, that is it for me. We want to turn it now to our our student question and student questions and answer. Mr. Ford, how about everybody give a round of applause for Mr. Hunter Ford down there with the microphone? Hunter, are we on?
Yes, check
We
1,
are-
2.
Okay, we are on. So let's turn to our first question asker.
What is the hardest season for you when it comes to farming?
Oh, could you repeat that? What is?
What is the hardest season for you when it comes to farming?
Well, the hardest season is, well, there are many hard seasons. In farming, actually, the winter, you would say, that's a time where the farmer has off, but that's actually a time when you actually let the soil rest in the winter to get ready for the next growing season if you're growing crops and things of that nature. As a beef cattle farmer, the winter is a challenging time because most of the times cows like to eat green grass. In the winter here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, green grass is not growing, so you have to feed them hay and some other things of that nature. So that consumes a lot of my time as a beef cattle farmer. Someone who's growing something else, maybe soybeans and things of that nature, winter may be more or less involved for them. But winter is a challenging time for a lot of livestock producers, and then the summer also is a very interesting time for farmers because again you spend a lot of time weeding and then taking care if you're growing crops and things of that nature. So I'll turn it over to someone else, but winter for beef cattle farmers.
Yeah, I'm going to say summer, hands down. For vegetable farmers, which is mostly what I grow is vegetables and fruit, plants are sun batteries, right? They use sun energy and they use that to grow. And the more sun there is, the faster everything grows. So everything is happening in summer at a rate that is impossible to keep up with every year. When you're in the summertime, when I'm in the summertime, I'm trying to follow the sun patterns too. And when we get those long days because of the climate that we're in, I'm working just as hard as the plants to keep up with what they're doing. And you never can, right? You can never beat back the weeds. You can never do everything the plants need. And it's hot, right? So I'm out here in the summer just trying to figure out how to live, just like these plants. And it's always a struggle. And so it's that overwhelming solar energy that really makes summertime hard for me. It's hard both to take a break and it's hard to do all the work.
As a non-farmer, but who works with farmers, I just wanted to say I think the hardest season is the one where you don't get enough water or you get too much. So the drought or the flood, whatever year that comes. One of the things that I'm excited about that we're doing here at Cornerstone is there are techniques that we know now that we can use to help balance water. And one of the things that we're aspiring to do at Cornerstone is to install something called rainwater harvesting, which are basically huge plastic boxes that are either above ground or sometimes buried that capture rainwater off the roof during floods or storms when there's more than we need. And then they hold it, and that'll keep it from rushing into that creek right next to you and causing damage to the creek and erosion, which is when the soil gets washed away. And then we'll have it on site, so when you're having a dry season and Kyle needs it, there'll be water on site.
Hi, my name is Kaylee, and my question is, I would like advice about how to make my garden be able to grow good plants and herbs.
All right, thank you. That's a great question. So I live on about 16 acres in eastern Henrico down off Route 5, down near the river. And my wife and I work it together, and we've kind of divided the labor this way. And she says and I say, I grow the soil and she grows the vegetables. So I think to begin with, the primary thing that you want to do is make sure you have healthy soil. And there's a couple ways to do that. Conventionally, folks would put a lot of fertilizer on it, and that's petroleum-based, and sometimes it's over-fertilized, and that runs into our streams and all. But there's natural, sustainable ways to do it as well. And she always makes a lot of fun at me because I get very excited about soil, and somebody will come out and I'll begin to show them the worms we have in our compost pile, and her eyes roll back in her head, and she kind of loses interest really fast. But that's how her flowers and her vegetables do well. And then the straw, the grass that we grow for the goats that we raise, that's what it does well. So I collect up a lot of leaves from lawn services who otherwise would be paying them to dump or paying to have them placed somewhere else. I take them free of charge. And then I have a connection with a couple of chicken farmers that bring in some loads of chicken manure. And I mix those things together, and I got a couple of long rows, and I've done some different things. Okay, she would roll her eyes now, but one of the things I got really excited about was I found a used bouncy house fan, that blows in there. It's at the bouncy house. So I used that and some perforated pipe and laid it down about 70 feet and have it capped off, and it's on a timer. And so instead of me having to turn that particular row, my goal is, because that means I got to pull a tractor out, I got to roll it over, I got to bring it back together, or have a big expensive piece of machinery to do it. So instead of doing that, because to have good compost, you got to have air. Otherwise, it goes anaerobic and it starts to stink. It's just a trash pile at that point. So instead of rolling it all the time, boy, y'all's eyes are glazing over. I can tell right now. You're just like my wife. No, instead of rolling it, I pump air in there through this bouncy house pump that comes on about 10 minutes an hour. And I've got this beautiful pile of compost that I would love for you all to come see and check my worms out. So that would be my thought. Grow good dirt and you'll grow good plants.
Next time you got to bring some for us.
Yeah. Okay. I would jump in and say that some general advice is just to get to know what you want to grow. So when you fight nature, it's not going to work, right? So when you know the plant that you want to grow, if you want to plant tomatoes, learn about tomato plants. And you'll learn pretty quickly that you can't plant it outside now. So if you learn about those individual plants that you want to grow, or about the food that you want to eat, then all this stuff comes secondary, right? Oh, well, the tomato plant needs a lot of food to grow those juicy tomatoes, so I'm going to have to take care of the soil. Or, well, the carrot's going to grow underground, so I need to make sure that the soil is nice and loose in a way that you wouldn't necessarily if you're planting just a tomato plug in the ground. So build those relationships.
And I would just say, in keeping with those, start small. A pot in your bedroom with one plant, and then learn how to take care of that, and then get bigger. The first time I started a garden, I got way too excited, and I did too much, and it didn't succeed, and I was really depressed. And it took me a while to get my confidence back, so start small.
Well, we have about 10, 12 minutes, so we'll do, yeah. So keep on going. You're doing great, guys.
How do you think advancements in technology will affect the future of agriculture?
Right. So I'm so excited about the technological advancements. There are so many people in agriculture that are using drones, unmanned systems. People are actually using robots to harvest fruits and vegetables and things of that nature. So technology will play a significant role in agriculture and the way farming is done here in the United States, because we will continue to use precision agriculture where you don't even have to drive a tractor. The tractor will drive itself. So the farmers, the skill sets that farmers will need, they are changing right now because technology is doing a lot of the work that we used to do as humans.
Since my technology involves a bouncy house fan, I'm going to skip answering this question. So,
I would say also I'm particularly excited about the technologies we're developing to measure and learn about ecology and about environments on our farm. In our program at Reynolds Community College, we focus a lot on observation of the farm and learning what we can about the relationships between, for example, microorganisms that we need special technology to see and develop relationships with, and the plants that we can see. So I think the more we learn about biological life on the farm, the more we can learn how to work with nature and not against it. Right?
Super fast. I think we've got to be careful about technology, because our ancestors, every single person in this room, our ancestors grew their own food. At some point back up the road without advanced technology. And some of the things that we're having to deal with now are mistakes that were made when we fell in love with new technology. You're talking about petroleum based fertilizers as an example. So we have to be really smart about not just grabbing onto a technology because it's the latest new thing, but picking and choosing what actually is going to make our farms healthier.
My name's Deborah, and what advice would you give someone who may be interested in urban farming?
What? I'm sorry. What was the question? Yeah.
Advice for someone interested in urban farming?
For someone interested in urban farming, and I'm gonna bounce this back to Nicole's, which is start small. I started farming just in a backyard in Jackson Ward, and I only had about 4 square feet. I started with 2 plants, and they were herbs that I could grow in an area that didn't have a whole lot of sun. So I think the most important thing when you're working with urban agriculture is look at what you have, use what you got. You may not have a whole lot of space, but you might have a fence, you could grow something up. So look for creative opportunities to use what you have, and be really careful about the soil. So urban soils have been lived on for a long time. So my advice for many first-time urban gardeners is to create your own soil on top of your backyard soil. Because otherwise you have to test and see if there's anything in your soil you might not want to eat. So in my garden now in Church Hill, I've got some nice sun. I was able to move into a place with some more sunlight, and I did test the soil, and away from the house it's okay. So I can grow a lot more there. But start small, look at what you got, and notice how much sunlight you have and what your soil is like, and then react to that. And get to know your neighbors. I'm the guy with the chickens on my block. My neighbor grows some really good kale. I don't have space for that, so we trade.
Hi, my name is Autumn, and could there be a way to incorporate some of the vegetables and the fruit the school grows into school lunches?
That is my dream. I just think it would be so cool if you guys were eating lunch that you grew. There's something magical about putting a bite in your mouth and knowing and remembering the hot day when you harvested it, or the cold day when you put the seed in the soil. It's challenging because there's a system set up for putting food on your plate in the cafeteria, and we need to figure out a way to get the fresh food in there that doesn't make it harder for the people who already work in your cafeteria, but we're working on it. So maybe ask me that question again in a year, okay?
That's a great question, and we've taken some really what I would consider very baby steps to do that. And here in Fairfield, there has been some of the salad grown in the farm used on the salad bars, but you're balancing things off because you got to remember your cafeteria workers and school nutrition service workers are there for a set period of time, and they've got to feed a whole bunch of y'all. And in Fairfield, for example, you got multiple cafeterias. For a while, your school nutrition workers were providing food down at Code RVA. So they had to prepare food that would be loaded into a van and stay warm and get down there and be able to serve those students as well. So it's a real challenge, and it's not just unique to schools. If you go to Henrico County Government Center and the cafeteria they have there that's run by a private contractor, it's very difficult because they're feeding a lot of people in a short period of time, and the cafeterias are ordinarily not set up to process fresh food. So just to decide one day that we want to incorporate more fresh food, it takes a number of steps to get there. And it will take reevaluating and reconfiguring and bringing in working with some of the federal government programs and others to bring in some of the things that are necessary to prepare fresh food. Just think about in your own home, if your mother or whoever does the cooking in your home gets ready to make some spaghetti or whatever and opens a can of tomato sauce, that's one thing that he or she can do and have it ready to go, and you're sitting there, I'm hungry, Mama, when are we gonna have it, right? And versus taking some tomatoes, probably boiling the tomatoes, take the skin off, turning them into a stew, and then making a homemade tomato sauce. That's a whole lot more to ask of your caregiver than to say, give me some spaghetti. So we have a lot of demands we place on people, but that's something that we should be moving towards. But it's going to take a whole bunch of thinking and a whole bunch of work to get there.
Just a show of hands, how many of y'all would be interested in helping make your cafeteria workers' jobs easier if it meant that you had fresh food in your lunches? So there are ways that we can help right here too. It's just making sure that we do it safely and that we do it efficiently.
It's funny how often that question comes up. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Zion. How can we use urban farming to make the school better?
Well, I mean, I think there are many ways that actually urban farming can enhance the learning experience here at Fairfield or any school when you, again, are able to grow or see how things grow and see the science behind growing things. For example, when I was a young kid, what really connected with me was when my grandmother asked me what was my favorite meal. And I want you to think about what is your favorite meal? What is it that you like to eat? And I think about it for a second. What do you like to eat? And I told my grandmother, I like hamburgers, I like French fries, and I like apple pie. She told me, okay, go pick some apples, because there were apple trees out there. She said, we have hamburger and we have potatoes. To see my grandmother create my favorite meal from things that she already had, things that she grew, that was so impressive. That was just so, and it was my favorite meal. So I had hamburger, French fries, and apple pie, the best apple pie ever. That was grown, that I saw these plants and this livestock grown right there. So I think when people see their food or their favorite meal being grown, and you're able to connect with that, I think that enhances the learning experience for everyone and maybe will help ignite someone's love or passion for producing their own food. So again, I think there are many ways that urban farming can help the school and the educational experience for everyone.
I am a tactile learner, which means I learn by doing and by touching. That's the sense that works best for me. So I really think farms and schools work really well together, because if I'm learning a concept in the classroom, like geometry, if I'm learning how to measure the area of a square, if I go out in somewhere, anywhere, and I practice how to do that with my hands, and I see why it's useful to me, like if I need to calculate the area of a vegetable bed in order to get the right amount of soil in there, then that's going to stick in my head. And I'm going to realize, A, that this knowledge is useful, and B, that I can do it with all of my body, and I'll remember that for my test, and then for later in life when I actually need it to do what I want to do.
Well, we maybe only have time for like 2 more questions. We're running a little low on time, so if there's anybody on this side who's really dying to ask their question, Mr. Ford has his microphone.
Hello, my name is Anthony. My question is, what do you think beef farming would look like on a different celestial body?
Wow, that is a very interesting question. I guess we'll have to know whether there's oxygen there or water, but there are companies and businesses now that actually produce beef in a laboratory instead of out on the farm, which again, it's interesting and concerning, but there are many ways to actually grow beef. And and that's one thing about nature. I mean, one thing about agriculture that I really find interesting too is that there are 3 things that we need to survive as humans. The first thing you need certainly is oxygen, you need water, and the third thing is you need nutrition. And so we have to figure out a way how we can grow that nutrition in a most effective way. But I'm not exactly sure how it would beef farming would look on another celestial body, but I'm pretty sure it would be interesting.
I think I'm going to take a different approach. I think it would look like a vegetable farm. I think what you would end up doing is, if you go back in the history of the human race, and you go back far enough and find where the human race developed, it developed where food grew naturally. Even before we began to eat protein from animals, the human race ate protein and its nutrition from grains and other naturally growing items. And so I think that if there was going to be a colony established on a different planet, somewhere else, that the first thing that we would do to sustain life there would be figure out how to grow nutritional food versus figuring out how to create farms that would grow cattle and protein and so of that nature. So I think it would look like a vegetable farm.
One more question there, Mr. Ford. One more question.
I'm Amari, and my question is, why is your dream to help children if many don't know who you are?
I'll be very brief. This is great because I can circle back where we started. I'm excited about all of you because you're something bigger than me. The fact that you're doing what you're doing and all of the adults in this room are supporting you and your families back home, you give me goosebumps, and that I don't get goosebumps about things about me. I get them excitement about you. So you're part of something bigger than me, and that's why whether you forget who I am or never knew who I was, I'm excited about your future.
I am as well. I just wanted to add on to that I think it's vitally important that we invest resources, time, energy into the young folks who will actually lead us into the future. And you never know what word or what inspiration you may be able to provide or motivation, because all of us, we were middle schoolers at one time, and people invested in us, and I think it's incumbent on us to give back and continue to nurture and to grow good citizens for the world. And so that's why I'm vitally interested in trying to get as many people interested in agriculture or government or policy making as possible. So I am delighted to invest in young folks anytime I can.
I've got 3 answers, and they're going to be super short. Number 1, I'm your neighbor. I live in Verina, and the creek that runs past your school eventually runs through my neighborhood. So that's part of the answer. I'm a mom, and so helping any child, my daughter, she was in middle school last year, so helping any child anywhere feels like I'm helping her. But the third reason is what I started with, which is this idea that we're all the same. I believe at our heart. So when we help each other out, people who know us, or when we help strangers, it's a way of making the whole world better, and that comes back on us.
Yeah, I'd echo that. You know, I'm inspired by people who I've never met. You know, when I listen to Lizzo, I've never met Lizzo, but Lizzo inspires me on a daily basis. So if I feel like if I could be more like Lizzo and inspire people who I'd never meet, then I'll be a better person.
Guys, this is such great answers. And Mr. Montgomery, I think what you said is true. It's such a treat to do this forum because when you look out, you really do get goosebumps because you see the futures of all of these students almost right in front of you. It's so wonderful. That is going, unfortunately, to end our forum. We wish we had so much more time with you guys.